Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Oh, I didn't do anything, Bai Xiaochun said, looking like the picture of innocence. Inside, he was feeling extremely pleased with himself, and couldn't have been happier. The giant ghost king had screwed him, and therefore he had screwed him right back. Therefore, the more shocked the giant ghost king looked right now, the more worth it all was. Although, you know how loyal and devoted I am to you, your highness, and how much I worry about you constantly. That, coupled with how well you've treated me over the years, left me no choice other than to put my life in the greatest danger, to go through countless trials and tribulations, to be spattered head to toe with blood, to come perilously close to the gates of hell, to reject all fear of suffering, of exhaustion, and even death for you. Because of all the favor you have shown me, I subdued all of them. He slapped his chest to emphasize his words, making it look like he was the type of person who would live or die for the giant ghost king, and would face death without blinking for him. You subdued them all? The giant ghost king almost felt like fainting. In the short time in which they had just been conversing, a dozen more messages had come into his transmission jade slip. Looking very impassioned, Bai Xiaochun loudly continued, "Yeah, I subdued every last one of them. The other 3 demigod heavenly kings were planning to blackmail you, right? They even sent people to try to steal what was yours. Therefore, I kidnapped all of their children and chosen, and brought them here, just for you, your highness. And now, you can take them into custody. Come, let me introduce you to everyone, your highness. We'll start with the junior champion king from War Champion City." Getting more excited, he smacked his bag of holding to bring out the gasping junior champion king. The junior champion king was currently little more than skin and bones, and his life force had been seriously damaged. He seemed to be struggling on the verge of death. And here's Prince Zhou Hong from 9 Serenities City. With that, he produced Zhou Hong. Oh, and this one here is, wait, what did they call him? Oh right, Little Wolf God. And this is Li Tiansheng. And here's Miao Liner. She's pretty incredible, and is actually much more suitable for you than Mrs. Chen. I brought her here especially for you, your highness. With that, he cast a very knowing wink at the giant ghost king. Right, there's also Princess Xu Shan from Spirit Advent City. This girl is a bit of a nutjob. What a pity. Oh, this guy. I think he's pretty special, actually. I heard people calling him second prince. I guess he must have a pretty high status. You definitely need to make good use of him, your highness. It took a lot out of me to kidnap him. Clearly in very high spirits, Bai Xiaochun went on to patiently introduce everyone to the giant ghost king as he pulled them out of his bag of holding one by one. Before long, the giant ghost king was as flabbergasted as a wooden chicken as he watched more than 100 people fill his palace hall. Virtually all of them were skinny and emaciated, some of them so weak that they simply lay on the floor, unmoving. It was all for you, your highness, that I captured these people and brought them here. Looking like he was ready to go through hell or high water for the king, Bai Xiaochun clasped hands and bowed deeply. The giant ghost king felt like his mind was being struck by countless lightning bolts. However, considering the level of his cultivation base and willpower, after sitting there in a daze for a moment, he managed to recover. By this point, he realized what had occurred, and understood why he was getting so many messages via jade slip. He also felt like he was slipping into a nightmare. In all of his complicating plotting and scheming, the one thing he hadn't accounted for was how powerful Bai Xiaochun actually was. He was so strong that he had kidnapped all of these people. The sight of Bai Xiaochun solemnly producing all of the chosen caused bitter laughter to rise up in the heart of the giant ghost king, and his face even began to twitch. I underestimated this Bai Hao, he thought. First, he kidnapped his father. Then he kidnapped me. He's obviously addicted to kidnapping. I can't believe that in one fell swoop, he kidnapped over 100 people. This sly bugger was obviously pissed off, and believes that I screwed him over. Therefore, he used this method to screw me back. Furthermore, he didn't kill anyone. No matter how you look at it, it really is a meritorious service. His heart was pounding, and he could feel a massive headache coming on. Obviously, this was a very important matter, and it was clear that Bai Xiaochun was intentionally doing it to cause problems for him. Under any other circumstances, it might not have mattered. But the giant ghost king had also broken the rules regarding the necromancer kettle. He had wanted to keep things low-key, to forestall any problems. Never could he have imagined that something like this would unexpectedly occur. The 3 heavenly kings, and the vast majority of the nobility and aristocracy, would definitely use this opportunity to cause problems for him. Furthermore, he was in a very precarious position. If he simply let all of the captives go, it would send the message that the supposedly majestic giant ghost king was actually scared. But not releasing the captives wasn't an option either. He was a demigod, and one of the 4 heavenly kings, but he couldn't tackle all of the wildlands at the same time. Despite feeling extremely annoyed, there wasn't anything he could do at the moment. Ultimately, he was in the wrong in this matter. He had been the one to screw Bai Xiaochun over, and had even made plans that would have ensured success even if he died. If Bai Xiaochun had ended up dying, it probably wouldn't have mattered. But here he was alive, and despite how vicious the giant ghost king was in general, when he thought about their history together, and the fact that he was a demigod king, if he went and bit the hand that fed him, his reputation would suffer irreparable damage. Most importantly, Bai Xiaochun hadn't killed anyone, a shrewd and ruthless move that left the giant ghost king with almost no wiggle room. Had he killed all the other chosen, it would have been a simple matter to deal with. The giant ghost king could have put all the onus on Bai Xiaochun. But instead, Bai Xiaochun had delivered everyone to him alive. No matter what action the giant ghost king took, he would be in a very difficult situation. This Bai Hao is completely ruthless. The giant ghost king looked over the crowd of emaciated chosen in the hall, and noticed how their life force had been damaged. Clearly, that was a method Bai Xiaochun was using to make sure the giant ghost king didn't just casually let all the captives free. If I do let them go, it's going to cost me dearly, he thought with a long sigh. Then he looked over at Bai Xiaochun with a bitter smile. He had to admit that Bai Xiaochun had played his hand perfectly. When he thought about the price he would have to pay to calm everyone down, he was so depressed that his internal organs hurt. Of course, Bai Xiaochun was actually feeling very nervous. This matter of screwing over the giant ghost king wasn't a conspiracy, it was an open attack. Therefore, he had to be very careful not to push the giant ghost king past his bottom line. Seeing that the man was sighing bitterly, Bai Xiaochun realized that his revenge had been had. Blinking a few times, he said, "Your humble servant will take his leave now. When it comes time for the spirit banquet, Your Highness, I'll be back." The giant ghost king glared back at him and waved his hand. "What spirit banquet? There's no spirit banquet. Get the hell out of here." How stingy, Bai Xiaochun thought. Rubbing his nose a bit in embarrassment, he reluctantly turned and left the royal palace. Once he was out in the open, his face lit up with joy, and he became a beam of light that shot toward his residence. As soon as he was back home, he went into his secluded meditation chamber, where he sat down cross-legged, took a deep breath, and then looked at his bag of holding. There was still one person in there that he hadn't handed over to the king. It was none other than Chen Manyao. I think there's a 50-50 chance that Chen Manyao has figured out who I am. So what am I supposed to do? All of the wonderful feelings that had come from successfully screwing over the giant ghost king disappeared, replaced by a frown. He thought about bringing her out to just talk the matter over, but wasn't sure if that was the right thing to do. After all, there was still the possibility that she didn't know who he was. In that case, if he tried to openly discuss things with her, it would only be giving her more chances to do just that. And yet, not bringing her out left him in a bit of a deadlock. He really wasn't sure what to do. Whatever. I'll just put the matter out of mind and do some meditating. Burying the matter in his heart, he thought back to everything which had occurred in the necromancer kettle, and as he did, his eyes began to shine brightly. My heaven-down nascent soul really is shockingly effective. With all of the 5 elements backing it, I can basically crush any other cultivator in the same level as me. Without my heaven-down nascent soul, it would have been really difficult to kidnap all of those people. Pursing his lips to suppress his laughter, he examined the 5-colored glow coming off of his nascent soul, and his enthusiasm grew deeper. Ha ha ha, I'm so strong already. As of this moment, he felt more than ever that all the work he had put into forming his heaven-down nascent soul had been worth it. Then he thought back to the events of the necromancer kettle, and how he had used the eternal parasol to absorb the life force of so many cultivators. Although he hadn't absorbed Shushan's life force, he had surreptitiously done so to the dozen or so captives she had given him. As a result, his undying bones were now in the 8th stratum of the tempered bones level. The 8th stratum. Although his cultivation of the undying bones seemed to be going slow in some respects, he was actually going more quickly than he had with the other parts of the undying codex. Furthermore, it was propelling him to almost unbelievable heights. Once I break through to the 9th stratum, my undying Emperor's Fist will double in power. Compared to all my cultivation progress though, the most important thing I got in the necromancer kettle was my apprentice. I got Bai Hao's soul. Eyes shining brightly, he looked into the soul-hoarding pagoda in his bag of holding, within which was a solitary vengeful soul. Bai Hao, eyes flickering with various memories, he murmured, "It's time to restore your mind, my apprentice." Restoring Bai Hao's mind was of the utmost importance to Bai Xiaochun. Bai Hao was his apprentice, and if he had never been able to locate his soul, it might have been a different story. But after recovering it, there was no hesitation on his part about what to do. If this had happened back when he had first arrived in the wildlands, it would have been very difficult for him to accomplish what he was now setting out to do. But now, he was a celestial necromancer, and had a vast amount of valuable treasures from the 3 great clans. Most importantly, he had 2 secret treasures from those great clans, the lotus seed pod and the drop of blood. Those 2 secret treasures were specifically designed for use with souls. That was especially true of the blood drop, which was the secret treasure from the reserve savings of the Chen clan. It could restore all of the memories that existed in the previous life of a soul, and turn that soul into something like a ghost cultivator. As for the lotus seed pod, it could be used to form a brand new body. Although he wasn't sure if it would work as well on dead ghosts as it could on living beings, he was determined to try. Despite that, he didn't take action blithely. The lotus seed pod only had 2 seeds in it, and there was only 1 drop of blood. Therefore, he wanted to make sure he was thoroughly prepared before he began. In the end, he would only have 1 chance to succeed. In fact, he even paid a visit to the Chen clan and had a meeting with their new clan chief. After talking the man up, and even offering a bit of compensation, he won him over with his sincerity, and acquired more detailed information on how to use the blood drop. After getting all the information he needed and returning, he only felt more nervous than before. This drop of blood has some mystical powers. It can actually restore the memories of a soul's previous life. However, the process is very dangerous, and is very draining on the soul. Perhaps it would be a more certain process if it were a diva soul, but Bai Hao was only in Foundation establishment when he died. It's hard to say whether or not I'll be able to make it work. However, there was nothing he could do about the matter. Bai Hao's soul was now a vicious entity, nothing more than a soul body that couldn't practice any form of cultivation. Even if he restored his memories, it seemed he would be stuck for all eternity as a Foundation establishment soul, unable to make any progress. The only thing I can do is use a whole bunch of soul medicine during the blood fusion process. It will be difficult to pull it off, but the results will definitely be better. Eyes flashing with determination, he immediately made arrangements to buy up all of the soul medicine in Giant Ghost City. After becoming the city's majordomo, he had been the recipient of numerous gifts, and had also ransacked the 3 great clans. As a result, he could certainly be considered well off. However, for Bai Hao's sake, he didn't hesitate to spend massive amounts of wealth on soul medicine. He had already built up a bit from ransacking the 3 great clans, and now that he spent so much money to acquire more, his stockpile began growing to terrifying proportions. As Bai Xiaochun began gobbling up all of the soul medicine in the city, terrifying things were shaking the hearts of all residents. More than 100 powerful experts had come to visit the city, including 3 devas. All of them had been spitting mad, and yet, kept their anger under control. Instead of charging into the city itself, they settled down cross-legged outside, effectively encircling the whole place. And that had only been the beginning. Afterward, numerous people appeared in the city via its teleportation portal. All of them were the type who had numerous followers, and didn't bother to even rein in their surging energy as they headed to the royal palace to talk with the giant ghost king. Before even the first of such meetings concluded, the teleportation portal shone brightly again as more people arrived. A steady stream of dozens of people showed up every day. By this point, more than 10 devas had entered the city. Of course, even a single diva was the type of monumental figure who could shake heaven and earth with the mere stomp of a foot. In fact, in the entire world, there weren't even a total of 50 devas in existence. But now, more than 10 were in Giant Ghost City, which left Duke Deathcrier with a very sinking feeling. Thankfully, the Giant Ghost King hadn't ordered him to go deal with these people, but had instead invited them to the royal palace to discuss matters. When he sent a group away, another would come to replace it. And thus, in a short period of only a few days, everyone in Giant Ghost City slowly grew numb to what was happening. Then guesses and speculations began to run wild. In the end, it was virtually impossible to keep the matter a secret. Bai Hao acted on the orders of His Highness the King to kidnap all of the chosen and heirs apparent of almost all of the nobility and aristocracy in the wildlands. Heavens! Is this Bai Hao addicted to kidnapping, or what? First it was his father, then His Highness the King, and now he kidnapped over 100 chosen in one fell swoop. His Highness the King is playing a big, complicated game. I really don't understand what exactly he's doing. As word spread, countless gasps could be heard in all corners of the city. By now, it was impossible to relate exactly how bold and powerful people took Bai Hao to be. Another 3 days went by, whereupon an intense roar shook heaven and earth in all directions. An enormous battle axe appeared in the air above Bai Xiaochun's residence, upon which stood a mighty figure who seemed capable of propping up all creation. 9 Serenity's King. The giant ghost king immediately emerged from his royal palace and flew up to confer with the 9 Serenity's King. After a moment, the 9 Serenity's King's face turned grim, and he followed the giant ghost king into the palace for a time before leaving. Soon after came the enormous mountain of flesh that was the Spirit Advent King. After that was the War Champion King. The things which the people of Giant Ghost City were seeing left all of them gaping in shock. 7 days passed. Gradually, things at the teleportation portal calmed down a bit. Of course, Bai Xiaochun tried to stay as out of sight as possible, and didn't even dare to make inquiries to find out exactly what had resulted. He knew that the giant ghost king was obviously in a horrific mood. Well, you can't blame me. If you hadn't screwed me, I wouldn't have screwed you. Despite feeling himself to be in the right, he knew who between the two of them was the most powerful. Muttering to himself, he remained in secluded meditation, and continued to buy up soul medicine. At one point, he also secretly took a trip to confer with Mrs. Chen. Just as Bai Xiaochun had guessed, the giant ghost king was in a foul mood. During the 7 days of meetings with various groups, he had sent away all of the various chosen that Bai Xiaochun had kidnapped. Some of the people who had come to retrieve their chosen were the type that the giant ghost king could completely disregard. There were even some he could intimidate with a mere look, but there were others who could force him to pay a bit of a price. For example, the Spirit Advent King and War Champion King. First, the giant ghost king broke the rules of the necromancer kettle, and then, due to a freak combination of other factors, had both of their heirs beaten half to death. The 9 Serenity's King was even harder to calm down. In fact, the smile on his face only grew colder as their discussion proceeded. The 9 Serenity's King had attacked the giant ghost king during his decay period, and had also broken certain rules himself, which showed his attitude and what he was capable of. Therefore, they were not able to get anywhere in their negotiation. Eventually, the giant ghost king called in the War Champion King and the Spirit Advent King to join the discussion, and in the end, the 9 Serenity's King had no choice but to grit his teeth angrily and leave. The biggest headache of all came when dealing with the second prince. There was simply no way to work around the fact that he was part of the imperial clan. Although that clan was currently in decline, with most of the power being held by the Grand Heaven Master, the second prince was still a prince. The imperial clan was still not the kind who would brook humiliation, and thus, it was to the giant ghost king's great rancor that he paid a significant price to work everything out. The giant ghost king was currently standing in a pagoda in the royal palace. Kneading the bridge of his nose, he sighed and murmured, finally managed to send them all away. During the process, he had schemed, he had formed alliances, he had used every trick in his book to minimize his losses as much as possible. In the end, he was left feeling exhausted. It's all the fault of that bastard brat. The mere thought of Bai Xiaochun caused his eyes to widen angrily. However, it was at that point that he felt 2 warm arms wrapping around him from behind. It was none other than Mrs. Chen. The giant ghost king turned to look at her, and his gaze softened. She took the opportunity to say some nice things about Bai Hao, and as a result, the giant ghost king's anger faded a bit. He also began to think about all the good things Bai Hao had done for him. Well, it certainly cost me, but at least I got the ghost king fruit. I guess it was all worth it. Without Bai Hao on my side, the ghost king fruit would likely have been taken by one of the other 3 kings. If that had happened, I would have ended up paying 10 times the price that I did. In the end, things did seem to have worked out fairly. Snorting, the giant ghost king decided not to worry about the matter anymore. Bai Xiaochun waited for a few more days, and when it seemed that the giant ghost king wasn't going to be coming for him, he finally started to feel confident about the whole situation. With that, he put even more effort into buying soul medicine, and soon, had the stockpile he needed. With that, he gritted his teeth and started his work to restore Bai Hao's mind. Of course, the matter was too sensitive, so he didn't dare to do his work in Giant Ghost City. If any mistakes occurred, the ramifications could be too severe. Therefore, he found a remote location outside of the city where he set up plenty of restrictive spells to make sure no one could see him. His preparations having been made, he settled his mind, pulled his soul-hoarding pagoda out of his bag of holding, and then took out Bai Hao's soul. A glowing halo of light surrounded the soul as it floated in Bai Xiaochun's hand. It seemed confused at first, but quickly came to its senses, looked at Bai Xiaochun and then let loose a soundless howl of rage. Then it lunged at the halo as if to break past it and attack him. As for Bai Xiaochun, he looked at Bai Hao's soul, and many complicated emotions filled his heart. Within moments, Bai Hao's eyes began to shine with madness and greed, until Bai Xiaochun finally sighed and unleashed some of the pressure of his cultivation base. Instantly, the soul body in the halo shivered and backed down, instinctively fearful of him. "It is destiny that brought us together," Bai Xiaochun murmured. 1. To be clear, the text uses the generic word for world, which could be interpreted in different ways. Considering the context, it could mean the wildlands, but more broadly, it could also mean the world that includes the heavenspan region. There is no way to tell definitively from the context. Eventually, the pressure rolling out from Bai Xiaochun onto Bai Hao's soul became so intense that the surface of the shield rippled. Then Bai Hao's soul let out a piercing scream, and he shied away. However, it was with vicious determination that Bai Xiaochun then waved his left index finger toward the shield. The shield distorted even more dramatically, and then Bai Hao's soul shivered as though it had been struck by a powerful attack. Then, it collapsed and remained motionless. According to the information Bai Xiaochun had gained from the Chen clan, in order to use the blood drop, one had to render the soul body in question completely incapable of resistance. If it resisted in the least bit, the operation would fail, and the soul would be completely destroyed. In its state moments ago, Bai Hao's soul had been completely incapable of fighting against Bai Xiaochun. All it had taken was a bit of pressure to not only cow the soul, but to knock it unconscious. Now, it was time to move on to the next step. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath and looked a bit more closely at Bai Hao's soul. A moment later, his eyes began to shine with determination. "Well, Bai Hao, whether or not this works is all up to your own good fortune." With that, he waved his right hand, causing the shield of light to vanish. For the first time, Bai Hao's soul appeared out in the open. Next, Bai Xiaochun slapped his bag of holding, producing a jade bottle that he gingerly opened. Inside was a drop of blood that he let fall onto Bai Hao's soul. As soon as it touched the soul, it shattered to create a blood-colored mist that poured into the soul. In the blink of an eye, the soul began to shiver, as though it were about to regain consciousness because of the intense pain it was feeling. Thankfully, Bai Xiaochun was paying close attention, and made sure to keep enough pressure on the soul to keep it unconscious. It was a delicate balance to maintain, but he succeeded. Soon, the blood mist was fully absorbed into Bai Hao's soul, which was beginning to thrash around so much it seemed it might begin to fade away. Apparently, there was some corrosive power within the drop of blood that was draining Bai Hao's soul, making it weak to the point where it might not be able to sustain the wastage. Bai Xiaochun knew that a critical moment had arrived. Maintaining full focus, he waved his left hand to produce a large quantity of soul medicine. He crushed it without hesitation, which caused numerous streams of soul power to spring out and then flow into Bai Hao's soul body, replenishing what was being drained away. However, the soul was being drained at a very rapid rate. Bai Xiaochun had just sent out 100 portions of soul medicine, but it was only able to counteract the wastage for a few breaths of time. Therefore, he produced more soul medicine. Time passed, and eventually he lost track of how much soul medicine he had used. With the soul medicine keeping him going, Bai Hao in soul form continued to merge with the blood. However, his soul body continued to twitch and distort as if in pain. Despite being unconscious, he could clearly feel what was happening. The process continued for a full 3 days. Despite the fact that Bai Xiaochun was in the Heaven Dao nascent soul stage, he was still starting to feel the exhaustion creeping up. During that time, he had to watch carefully every moment to make sure that Bai Hao didn't awaken at the wrong time. Simultaneously, he had to make sure he didn't exert too much pressure on him. It was a very delicate balance to maintain. Another task was to continuously feed soul medicine to Bai Hao. Any other type of nascent soul cultivator would probably have already reached the limit of their abilities. But Bai Xiaochun had spent years concocting medicine, and had razor-sharp focus. Despite being tired, he didn't let that interfere with his work. According to the information from the Chen clan, it takes 7 days to absorb the blood. We're almost half done at this point. He didn't grow lax in the least bit. When the 3rd day passed, and the 4th day arrived, a gold design suddenly appeared on Bai Hao's soul. The sight of that golden design instantly lifted Bai Xiaochun's spirits. Based on what he had learned from the Chen clan, he knew that the main factor playing into whether or not the soul body recovered memories from its previous life was that very golden design. It was like evidence of the soul's fate, and once it appeared, it meant that the soul could once again appear in the world as it had in the past. However, in the moment that the golden design appeared, it seemed that the pain Bai Hao's soul was enduring suddenly grew more intense. He let out a miserable shriek, and his eyes snapped open. In that instant, Bai Xiaochun could tell that his soul body was just about to fall apart. Cracks even began to spread out on its surface. Bai Xiaochun's face fell at this sudden, unexpected development, and he instantly got extremely nervous. He knew that exerting more pressure wouldn't resolve the issue, and therefore, he poured more soul medicine into Bai Hao's soul body. However, that did nothing to forestall the imminent collapse of the soul body. More cracks spread out on its surface. Clearly, a very critical moment had arrived. "Hang in there, Bai Hao," Bai Xiaochun said through gritted teeth. With that, he produced a lotus seed, crushed it, and dropped the resulting powder onto Bai Hao's soul. Although he couldn't be certain that this method would work, his previous analysis and augury of the seed had left him 60% certain that it would help restore a soul. The moment the powder of the crushed lotus seed landed onto Bai Hao's soul, gentle light began to spread out in all directions. At the same time, the cracks on the surface of his soul body vanished. Within the space of a few breaths of time, he recovered completely. The excitement in Bai Xiaochun's eyes shone brightly as he adjusted the pressure he was emitting, and then brought out more soul medicine to feed to Bai Hao. 3 more days to go. Although Bai Xiaochun managed to keep calm and focused, he was still panting a bit, and his eyes were completely bloodshot. Now that the golden design had appeared, it took much more soul medicine than before to keep him stabilized. But Bai Xiaochun was well prepared. He crushed soul medicine as if it were the least valuable thing in the world, spending amounts that would cause most people to stare in complete and utter shock. The wealth vanishing here was enough to drive entire clans bankrupt, and yet, Bai Xiaochun didn't feel the slightest prickle of pain in his heart. No material possessions were worth more to him than Bai Hao. Bai Hao was his apprentice, and the first person he had encountered after being teleported to the wildlands. Furthermore, he had used Bai Hao's identity to accomplish many, many things. The feelings that had built up for Bai Hao because of all that were not those which could be measured in terms of soul medicine. Soon the 4th day had passed, and the 5th day arrived. After that was the 6th day. As time marched on, Bai Xiaochun's eyes grew more and more bloodshot, and his exhaustion mounted. Because of the mounting pressure, his expression became one of pure vigilance and concentration. It lasted all the way until the 7th day came. The final 24 hours, he murmured. By this point he was a bit wan, and his eyes were crimson. All of his energy was focused on maintaining balance. As time passed, Bai Hao's soul grew more and more stable, and the golden design that covered his soul body grew more and more dazzling. With every pulse of golden light, Bai Hao's soul seemed to grow more calm and thoughtful, and less violent. As these things occurred, Bai Xiaochun continued to sigh emotionally. The final 2 hours, he murmured. In his excitement, he couldn't help but imagine what it would be like when he succeeded, and Bai Hao got all of his memories back. How would he tell him about everything that had occurred after his death? "I feel like I know you so well, but to you, I'm a complete stranger." Bai Xiaochun shook his head and put such thoughts aside for the moment. Instead, he focused fully on Bai Hao's soul. Soon, the final moments were ticking down, and Bai Hao's soul seemed to have lost all of its previous viciousness and violence, and was now completely calm. Eventually, he sat up in place, a blank look on his face. That was when the crackle of thunder could be heard in the sky above. Black clouds converged, and a violet bolt of lightning suddenly shot down toward Bai Xiaochun, catching him completely off guard. "Is that tribulation lightning? How could there be tribulation lightning?" The lightning instantly shot down through the mountain until it was right above Bai Xiaochun's head. As it did, he anxiously reached up with his right hand, drawing on the full power of his cultivation base to fight back. A boom could be heard, and blood sprayed out of his mouth as he was sent flying backward, where he slammed loudly into the rock wall of the cave. However, he wasn't significantly hurt. Unfortunately, he had only cut down the power of the lightning bolt by about half. The rest of it fell directly onto Bai Hao, who had just opened his eyes. Immediately, a tremor ran through him, and cracks spread out all over him. He appeared to be right on the verge of falling apart. "Bai Hao!" Bai Xiaochun roared. Without any hesitation, he threw out his final lotus seed. Although pain and confusion filled the eyes of soul form Bai Hao, they were quickly replaced by lucidity. He looked over at Bai Xiaochun and saw the lotus seed flying toward him, and without even thinking about it, opened his soul body's mouth and swallowed it down. The moment it entered his mouth, it transformed in a soft warmth which spread throughout his entire body. He closed his eyes, shivering a bit as the cracks all healed up. The black clouds in the sky above seemed to be on the verge of building back up again, and yet, for some unknown reason, faded away. It took a very long moment for Bai Hao's soul form to restore balance. When all of the cracks on the surface of his body were healed, he slowly opened his eyes and looked around. Then, his eyes came to rest on a person who looked exactly like him in every aspect, and yet who wore a look of deep concern on his face. There was a sincerity to that concern that Bai Hao instantly recognized. It was something that, in his entire life, nobody had ever given to him except his mother. This person in front of him was the second person to ever look at him with an ounce of caring. "Who are you?" he asked softly. Bai Xiaochun's eyes flickered with excitement, and he took a deep breath. He had imagined this moment for a long time, and just as things had gone then, he assumed the mightiest pose he could think of. Lifting his chin slightly, he clasped his hands behind his back and, looking like the picture of a transcendent being, slowly said, "I'm your master." "Master," Bai Hao said, staring blankly at the person who looked exactly like himself. He was a bit confused about why this person would call himself his master. He didn't remember ever having a master before. If anything, the only masters he had ever had before his death were the handful of secret cultivation texts he had acquired back in his clan. He had all of his memories up to the moment of his death, but everything after that was mostly blank. All he remembered was a haze of violent madness in which he swam endlessly through blinding fog, consumed with the desire to eat any living thing he encountered. Those memories of madness caused him to gasp, and filled his heart with indescribable terror. It was almost as if the moment he closed his eyes in death, he had gone to sleep. Now he was awake, and yet, his heart was filled with more confusion than ever. Then he looked down at himself, and found that his own hands would pass through his body if he tried to touch himself. "I'm a soul body," he murmured, a glint of sadness appearing in his eyes. As of this moment, he realized that he really had died. But if I've become nothing more than a soul, then why do I still have all my memories? All of the things he was currently experiencing had Bai Hao feeling extremely confused. As for Bai Xiaochun, he stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, glancing down out of the corner of his eye at Bai Hao, trying to look as profound as possible. He was also secretly measuring him up, and when he realized that he was simply staring off into space, and completely ignoring him, he started to feel a bit awkward, and even a bit miffed. With that, he loudly cleared his throat to remind Bai Hao that he was standing there. In response, a strange expression appeared on Bai Hao's face, and he looked up again at Bai Xiaochun. Gradually, his eyes began to flicker thoughtfully, and he said, "Senior, are you the person who appeared beneath that tree right before I died?" From the way he spoke, it seemed as if he were putting the pieces of the puzzle together even as the words left his mouth. Each word struck Bai Xiaochun's like lightning, and his eyes flickered at how incredible Bai Hao was. Only a few words had been spoken since he woke up, and he had already deduced Bai Xiaochun's identity. "The reason you look like me, Senior, is that you must have assumed my identity after I died. As for why we are now able to meet again in person, though, I really can't wrap my mind around that." More confusion appeared in his eyes, as if he almost couldn't believe what was happening. Bai Xiaochun gave him a profound look. Although he had always known Bai Hao was intelligent, he could never have imagined that he would be this intelligent. "That's correct. After you died, I looked through your bag of holding, and then took your place in the Bai clan." With that, he proceeded to explain to Bai Hao about how he had taken him as an apprentice. Then he went on to recount everything that had occurred during his time in the Bai clan, with the exception of a few points that were unnecessary to explain. As Bai Hao listened, it was impossible for him to hide the complex emotions he felt. He could almost visualize all the scenes Bai Xiaochun described, especially the incident in which his father had confronted him in the place where his mother had died. That was when his father had revealed that he was aware of how talented Bai Hao was in flame conjuring, and yet had gone on to talk about him submitting, and had even revealed open killing intent. At that point, hatred and anger began to burn brightly in Bai Hao's eyes. Bai Hao was familiar with his clan, especially Madame Kai and the clan chief. As such, he immediately realized that everything Bai Xiaochun was telling him was true. Eventually, Bai Xiaochun explained how, as Bai Hao, he had killed Bai Qi, turned traitor against the clan, and had later used his power as a follower of the giant Ghost King to exact harsh punishment upon the clan. He had killed the clan chief, executed Madame Kai, and installed the fifth young lady as the new clan chiefess. Bai Hao's chest heaved, and his mind reeled under the waves of shock that were caused by Bai Xiaochun's words. The things which Bai Xiaochun had done for him were things he himself could never have done even if he wanted to. Finally, Bai Xiaochun explained how he had randomly encountered Bai Hao's soul in the necromancer kettle. He also went on to describe, without any exaggerations, the dangers which had been involved. In fact, he actually glossed over that danger to some extent, giving mostly just an overview. However, Bai Hao was smarter than the average person, and realized that within the glossed over areas of the story, there definitely were moments of profound danger and crisis. Shivering, he looked up at Bai Xiaochun, eyes shining with gratitude. Although he realized that this person had obviously done many things out of his own self-interest, he had also helped him get the vengeance he deserved, and would have sought for himself if he could. Senior, Before he could complete his sentence, he was interrupted by Bai Xiaochun, who said, and that's everything that happened. Don't put too much thought into it. You're my apprentice, and I'm your master. With me around, people can only dream of bullying you. He slapped his chest proudly to emphasize his words. Do you want to know who your master is? I'm the majordomo of Giant Ghost City, and also the inspections commissioner. There is only one person who ranks higher than me, and tens upon tens of thousands who rank below me. HMMMPHH. I even kidnapped the Giant Ghost King once. And in the necromancer kettle, I kidnapped the heirs apparent and chosen from almost all of the important clans and organizations in the wildlands. Crown princes, heirs apparent, princesses? I defeated each and every one of them. Oh right, there was also some guy everyone called the second prince. With that he went on to brag a bit more about everything which had occurred in the necromancer kettle, and this time he didn't gloss over anything. He actually described everything in vivid detail, the way he normally would. Bai Hao responded by looking at him with mute astonishment. Just stick close to your master from now on. I already have formulas for everything from 1 to 17 colored flame. Considering your latent talent in flame conjuring, I want you to start researching the formula for 18 colored flame. Later on when I'm powerful enough, I'll form a new body for you. Come, hurry up and kowtow to master. Then I can give you the gifts I owe you for becoming my apprentice. With that, he clasped his hands behind his back again, then lifted his chin and tried to look as strict as possible. At the same time, he glanced at Bai Hao out of the corner of his eye, waiting for him to kowtow in formal fashion to become his apprentice. A complex expression could be seen on Bai Hao's face. As a soul body, he could sense from the soul power fluctuations in the area that a large quantity of soul medicine had recently been used in the surrounding mountains. And as a necromancer, he knew that restoring the memories of a soul was a heaven-defying process of incredible difficulty. Clearly, this person who called himself his master had completely bloodshot eyes, and he was obviously working hard to appear to be in good condition. However, he couldn't cover up how wan he was. It was obvious that he had worked very hard, and paid a huge price, to restore Bai Hao's memories. Does he really care about me? He thought, a warm feeling building up inside of him. At this point, he recalled how, upon first recovering his memories, this person who called himself his master had been looking at him with deep concern. That concern gave rise to emotions that Bai Hao had not felt for a very long time. No one in his life had ever cared about him other than his mother. As a young man in the Bai clan, he had often been humiliated. As he grew older, he had harbored a deep if ignorant hope that he could gain the approval of his father, and perhaps the entire clan. But in the end, he had been cruelly slaughtered. As of this point, it was all in the past. After a long moment, he rose to his feet, walked over to Bai Xiaochun, and dropped to his knees. His expression was serious and sincere. He didn't want to sit around thinking about the past. He knew that this master of his had already gained vengeance for him, a kindness which filled him with profound gratitude. From the bottom of his heart, he was absolutely willing to be his apprentice. Everything from the past ended with my death, he thought. Now that I'm awake again, my master is my only family. As he swore this oath in his heart, he thought about the sincere concern Bai Xiaochun had showed for him, and was convinced that he had finally found a second person in his life who cared about him. Taking a deep breath, he said, Bai Hao offers formal greetings, master. Then he kowtowed deeply 3 times. After that he rose to his feet, then dropped back down to kowtow again. 3 expressions of respect. 9 kowtows. Bai Xiaochun was moved by what he was seeing, and his heart trembled with emotion. After silently accepting the kowtows, his gaze softened, and a profound feeling filled him that was a mixture of joy and pity. Wrestling his emotions under control, he laughed heartily and said, "Stick with master, my little apprentice, and you will eat the best food and drink the best alcohol. You can do anything your heart desires." With that, he waved his hand, sending Bai Hao into a soul-hoarding pagoda. Within that soul-hoarding pagoda, Bai Hao would have a large measure of freedom. He could come out into the open at any time he wished, and because of certain special aspects of his soul body, could take virtually any form he wished. After a moment, Bai Hao hesitated. Despite having taken this man as his master, he felt like there was something a bit unreliable about him. "Master, would it be possible for me to know your honored name?" Sounding extremely high and mighty, Bai Xiaochun responded, "Ahem. Remember, your master's true name is one that cannot be divulged to anyone else in the wildlands. If it became public, it could lead to drastic events that would affect all creation. It would be a calamity for the wildlands. Your master's name is Bai Xiaochun." After taking Bai Hao back with him to Giant Ghost City, the 7 days of protracted exhaustion led Bai Xiaochun to go into secluded meditation to recover. Before closing the door of the meditation chamber, Bai Hao requested that he be allowed to go out and explore a bit. After all, he had been dead for quite some time, and felt like seeing Giant Ghost City and the rest of the outside world. It was a very natural thing. After a bit of thought, Bai Xiaochun decided there was no reason not to accommodate his wishes, although he did offer a whole slew of warnings before letting him go. After all, Bai Hao's soul body was unique in many ways. Now that his memories were back, he could take almost any form he wished. Furthermore, considering how intelligent he was, as long as he was careful, he shouldn't run into any trouble. However, just to be on the safe side, he left a branding mark on him. That way, if Bai Hao ran into any trouble, Bai Xiaochun would be able to track him down immediately. Having accomplished these things, he felt comfortable enough to go into secluded meditation. As for Bai Hao, he changed his appearance and then left. Bai Hao had long since burned Bai Xiaochun's name into his memory, he would never forget it for the rest of his life. However, even more unforgettable were the things he heard people talking about after leaving Bai Xiaochun's side. Virtually everything he heard caused his anxiety to build. "Hey, keep your voice down. Don't let Bai Hao hear you. Bai Hao is completely shameless. He's vicious and merciless, to the point where he killed his own father and reviled his own clan." "That's nothing. I have a good friend who's a guard at Devil Penitentiary. He told me that back when Bai Hao was a guard there, he was the #1 Dark Inquisitor in Devil Penitentiary." "You don't know what Dark Inquisitors are? They're normal inquisitors whose hearts have turned to darkness. The prisoners that Bai Hao interrogated in Devil Penitentiary all ended up screaming with indescribable bitterness." "Heh, Majordomo Bai? Yeah, he's like a bolt of lightning that can shake heaven and earth. It's been years since a freak like him has appeared in the world. He had a core formation cultivation base, and yet he actually kidnapped His Highness the King." Bai Hao is completely vicious. He even likes to take the wives of other men. In order to get his hands on Mrs. Chen, he killed the chief of the Chen clan. I heard that he keeps her in his residence even now, and ravishes her 100 times a day. Completely outrageous. All of that is nothing. The most important thing to know is that Bai Hao is a complete and utter daredevil. Only recently, he kidnapped the chosen and heirs apparent of almost all the nobility and aristocracy in the wildlands. I saw with my own eyes the horrid state all of those chosen were in. It didn't matter if they were guys or girls, they had all been tormented to the point of being skin and bones. It was completely terrifying. When Bai Hao heard such things, he was at first puzzled, but soon left completely flabbergasted. The realization that his master had done so many shocking things left him feeling more than a bit jumpy. He began to make some discreet inquiries of his own about the things which had occurred, and soon learned that it was absolutely true that his master had kidnapped the giant ghost king while only in the core formation stage. Plus, there were other things which had occurred. After his rapid rise to prominence in the city, he shook down all 3 of the great clans. He was so well known in the city that his name could be used to stop children from crying. How fearless. I can hardly even imagine it. Bai Hao eventually reached the point of being speechless. However, during his time making inquiries, he also heard people talking about the Bai Xiaochun whose name was listed on the Hell Emperor stele, and soon learned that there was a bounty on his head. It was at that point that he realized that the fact that his master had revealed his true name to him showed a deep level of trust. Although Bai Hao was a wildlander, he had already died once, and didn't care as much about things from his previous life. It wasn't important to him who exactly Bai Xiaochun was, he was his master to whom he had kowtowed 9 times. Eventually he returned to Bai Xiaochun's secluded meditation chamber. By this point, he was convinced of how incredible his master was. Smiling wryly, he returned to the soul-hoarding pagoda in Bai Xiaochun's bag of holding. At that point, Bai Xiaochun opened his eyes, looked down at the bag of holding, and then smiled faintly. The entire reason he had revealed his true name to Bai Hao was because he trusted him. Perhaps such an expression of trust was very sudden, but it came from Bai Xiaochun's heart. Based on everything Bai Hao had said and done so far, Bai Xiaochun truly approved of him. On the same evening that Bai Hao returned from exploring the city, while Bai Xiaochun was still working on getting back into top shape, the giant ghost king sat on his throne in the royal palace, frowning at his transmission jade slip. He had just received a message from the imperial palace in Arch-Emperor City. The message had not been worded very strongly. In fact, it had taken the form of a single question. Why hasn't Chen Manyao been returned yet? It was a simple and calmly worded message, and yet it caused the giant ghost king's mind to reel. After all, the person who had sent the message was none other than he who controlled the Son of Heaven. He who could issue orders to everyone in creation. The Grand Heaven Master. The giant ghost king would rather offend all three of the other kings than provoke the Grand Heaven Master. Part of that was because the Grand Heaven Master was in a far higher place in the demigod realm than any of the four heavenly kings. But the bigger reason was that the Grand Heaven Master was a profound schemer, the type that could strike dread into the heart of anyone with whom he dealt. Chen Manyao, the giant ghost king murmured. He had heard that name before, and knew that she was one of the Grand Heaven Master's personal apprentices, and a top-rate beauty. However, Chen Manyao had not been among the chosen whom Bai Xiaochun had handed over to him. It only took the briefest of moments for the giant ghost king to come to a conclusion about what was going on. Not sure whether to laugh or cry, he immediately began to curse. Brat bastard, I'd bet money that he's entranced with her good looks. Considering his age, it's definitely time for him to have a Taoist partner. But definitely not Chen Manyao. Although the giant ghost king felt a bit of a headache coming on because of his fear of the Grand Heaven Master, he actually wasn't angry at all about Bai Xiaochun keeping Chen Manyao in custody. In contrast, he actually felt a bit of admiration. Because of all of the things which had happened between the giant ghost king and Bai Xiaochun, the level of formality which might have once existed between them had long since vanished. After all, he had said earlier on that if Bai Xiaochun helped him win the Ghost King fruit, he would come to view him as his son and heir. As far as the giant ghost king was concerned, Bai Xiaochun was the most outstanding and daring individual in his generation in the entire wildlands. Furthermore, the more he learned about the way Bai Xiaochun thought, the more the wily old fox in him approved. Bai Xiaochun could be daring, crafty, and adaptable, but also knew when to back off. Such a combination in one person was hard to come by. Were it not for that admiration, he would surely have gone completely mad because of the way Bai Xiaochun kidnapped everyone in order to screw him over. At the moment, the giant ghost king was right in the middle of laughter and tears. Sighing, he realized that Bai Xiaochun was actually acting in much the same way he himself would. With such thoughts on his mind, he cursed inwardly a few more times, then rose to his feet and vanished from within the royal palace. When he reappeared, he was outside of Bai Xiaochun's secluded meditation chamber. After looking around, he snorted coldly, but refrained from doing what he had last time and simply entering unannounced. Bai Hao, he said, filling his voice with plenty of cultivation bass pressure. Inside, Bai Xiaochun was performing some breathing exercises. Upon hearing the giant ghost king's voice, a tremor ran through him, and his eyes widened. Before he could do anything else, though, the giant ghost king sensed that he had opened his eyes and entered the meditation chamber. A bit shocked, Bai Xiaochun scrambled to his feet to clasp hands in formal greeting. Greetings, Your Highness. Inwardly, he was cursing at how annoying it was that the giant ghost king loved to secretly ambush him. This was the second time. How could someone as important as the king be so ignorant regarding manners? However, it was also obvious that, considering how anxious the giant ghost king seemed, he would likely not have come for any good purpose. Your Highness, he said quickly, I was careless in my cultivation and damaged my nascent soul. Considering how badly I'm injured, I definitely can't go anywhere. Oh, and I already consumed 9 heaven-cleaving good fortune pills, so those won't do any good. In the hopes of not making the same mistake as last time, he claimed to have consumed 9 of the pills, instead of the 3 which he had actually consumed. And of course, he made his statement without blinking a single time. Glaring, and clearly not very pleased at Bai Xiaochun's attitude, the giant ghost king snorted and said, Do you have Chen Manyao? The words struck Bai Xiaochun like lightning, and instantly caused his heart to start racing. He most certainly did have Chen Manyao in his custody. Up to this point, he still wasn't sure how to deal with her. Worried that she might recognize him, and that would cause problems, he had decided that he couldn't let her go. He quickly shook his head and put a very confused look onto his face. Who is Chen Manyao, Your Highness? Sounds kind of like a girl's name. Oh, don't tell me you've taken a liking to her, Your Highness? Fear not, he said, thumping his chest with his palm, your humble servant will definitely be able to get her for you. Any person who didn't know Bai Xiaochun very well would have been easily taken in. After all, his acting skills were top-notch, and whether it was his wording or the expression on his face, they were all very convincing. It really seemed as if he didn't know anyone by the name of Chen Manyao. But the giant ghost king did know Bai Xiaochun, and therefore, his glare intensified, and he growled, "Stop playing dumb. You listen to me, Bai Hao. You can't touch Chen Manyao. She has a very important background." A profoundly serious expression could be seen on the giant ghost king's face, and the pressure rolling off of him felt like thunderclouds. Such tactics would intimidate virtually anyone else, but Bai Xiaochun was familiar with the giant ghost king, so he put on a pained expression. Your Highness, I really don't know anyone named Chen Manyao. Enough, the giant ghost king said impatiently. It's only the two of us in here, so stop with the act. I know that you took a liking to Chen Manyao because of her beauty. But she's one of the beloved apprentices of the Grand Heaven Master. He's already asked about her, so hand her over immediately. She's just a hot girl, right? What's the big deal about that? I'll make up for it with plenty more girls. As far as he was concerned, it really was a minor matter. It was only a single girl they were talking about, and thus, he really couldn't understand why Bai Xiaochun was acting this way. Seeing that the giant ghost king wasn't going to back down caused Bai Xiaochun's nervousness to mount. He really didn't want to let Chen Manyao go. It had to do with his poor little life. However, despite thinking desperately, he couldn't come up with any backup plan. As for the giant ghost king, he could see that Bai Xiaochun was hesitating, causing his anger to rise. In fact, he was so infuriated that intense coldness immediately spread out in all directions. Bring Chen Manyao out immediately, Bai Hao. Don't make me use force. His voice was as cold as winter snow, and his eyes burned with cold fury. The meditation chamber even began to ice over. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.